What does it mean to be organized? This is a broad subject and there are many definitions. One definition that really resonated with me is this: the ability to find what you need when you need to find it. Organization is not just about how many resources we have. It's about being able to access those resources in a meaningful way. In this video, I will give you an overview on my philosophy of organization, many of the insights I've arrived at from getting my own system organized, and practical examples of how I've applied these insights in my Evernote. First, let's take a look at what it's like to be disorganized. A hoarder, a person who accumulates clutter in his or her home, is the epitome of a disorganized person. This is relatable to me because I live with a hoarding mom. This lack of organization in my life is what set me off on the search to truly understand what it means to be organized. Whereas for some people, organization might just be a form of common sense or a life hack or a guru pro tip, for me it was something that I had to truly unpack. I've come to see that organization is more than those things. It's a philosophy, a way of life. Organization is not a once and done thing. It should be approached with the aim of consciously designing a system. This motif of clutter accumulating is the essence of disorganization. This clutter can take different forms depending on the system we are talking about, but the result is always the same. When clutter accumulates, it results in the breakdown of the system for many reasons. First, when there's too much clutter, there is no space for us to put the things that actually need to be in the system. Second, when there is clutter, it taxes our mental bandwidth and there's less of it available for important things. Third, when clutter underlies a deeper issue, a lack of prioritization and categorization. I will elaborate on each of these reasons. The first reason I think is self-explanatory. In a hoarder's home, there is no space to put good, valuable things. The space is already being taken up by junk. The same logic applies to any sort of physical system. Even in a non-physical system, such as the mind, this analogy still holds true. Our attention is a limited resource. If we're focused on the equivalent of mental clutter, that means we aren't thinking about things we want or need to be doing. Mental clutter can be thought of as anything that sucks your attention into things that are stressful, unproductive, and otherwise not valuable. Various forms of anxiety, overthinking, and ruminations could fall under this category. We have to be willing to let go of clutter to make space for valuable things. For the second reason, I will introduce the concept of cognitive load, which is closely related to working memory. This is the notion that things take up space. For example, the items on a to-do list that we need to remember, they take up mental space. Things can also forcibly impose upon our cognitive load. In a hoarder's home, there is simply too much visual stimuli from all the clutter. This is too much information for our brain to process, and it causes a shutdown, an experience of mentally checking out. When this happens, we can't be focused on what actually matters. This is a huge problem for being organized. We have to be willing to let go of clutter in order to have mental energy available for valuable things. For the third reason, I will delve more deeply into what clutter is, what motivates accumulating clutter, and what the implications of this are for designing an organized system. So first off, what is a system? A system is a framework for looking at the world. In a system, there are various parts that interact. The interactions of these parts make up the state or output of the system. We conduct systems analysis in order to understand the interaction between the parts of a given system. This allows us to tweak the parts of a system in order to improve the overall system. A system for organization must be composed with a clear and conscious aim in mind. An organization system does not simply exist for the sake of it. It exists to accomplish a specific purpose, whatever is being organized. This means we must prioritize. We must decide what is important and what is not. The issue of hoarders, which is an issue many disorganized people share, is that they have not clarified the value they are looking for. If everything seems equally valuable, that is how clutter accumulates. When there are too many bad parts that are put into the system like this, a disorganized system breakdown is inevitable. More than just deciding what to keep and what to discard, it's also important that the parts of the system interact harmoniously. The parts of the system should support each other, not get in the way of each other. In this way, they can best bring out the value that the system is intended to accomplish. This means that the parts of the system must be put into the proper places. Let's imagine that you have everything in your living room piled up at your front door. It would be difficult to find what you need in that pile. You would have to rummage through it. In this situation, your resources are not a benefit. They are rather an obstacle impeding your ability to properly access your living room. And this happens because of the arrangement of the parts in the system. When each object is placed in a location you would expect to see it, you're able to find what you need. Moreover, the objects are arranged in a way that properly facilitates the purpose of the system and allows the system to be effectively navigated. This is the way an organized system should be. This brings me to my next point, which is that the parts of the system should be organized by functionality. When we organize by functionality, we get clear on the values of the parts in our system. For value is whatever functionality they serve. To figure out the functionality of a part in your system, simply ask, what role does this part play? We want to ask this question frequently so that we can comprehend what exactly each part does. Doing this is what allows us to figure out an organized arrangement for the parts in the system. Then the parts will synergistically come together such that the system as a whole becomes a value-producing ecosystem. When everything is put into its proper place, your living room serves many functionalities. You can turn on the television, you can grab your keys and go for a drive, you can pick up a snack in the refrigerator. Organizing by functionality also serves another purpose. When we do so, we can chunk together parts that serve the same function. This helps in our categorization. Perhaps we may decide that some of these parts are redundant since they serve the same purpose. Or perhaps we may decide to group them together in the same location so that they can be retrieved altogether. Chunking in these ways reduces the number of discrete parts to keep track of. This again goes back to working memory. According to studies, our working memory holds a very limited number of 4 to 7 discrete objects. Thus, it's to our benefit to reduce these number of discrete parts in our system to keep track of. In doing so, we keep our priorities straight and we don't overwhelm the load on our working memory. Speaking of priorities, disorganized people accumulate clutter because of a lack of prioritization. Rather, they prioritize fear over value. Disorganization is seldom a logical issue. Most people logically know that it's good to be organized. It's more often the case that disorganization is an emotional issue. Disorganized people do not assign value to the parts in their system and think from that perspective. They act on fear, such as the fear of missing out. They accumulate clutter out of the fear of maybe I'll need that one day. Of course, that day seldom comes, and that's because there was no conscious role, function, or purpose in mind. The things were accumulated on autopilot as a default reaction to fear. To wrap up this first video on the philosophy of organization, let me give you a specific example as it pertains to organizing a PKM, personal knowledge management system. This was a big breakthrough in the organization of my Evernote. I realized that it pays to separate out random ideas that are interesting but have no clear use at this moment from ideas that are already being used. These are two distinct functionalities. My random ideas are interesting possibilities. There's potential I could use them one day, but that is not foreseeable at this time. I think of them as fertilizer. They are my creative inspiration. That is their purpose. By breaking them out into this category, I get clear on what their value is. This way, I am not just hoarding to accumulate clutter. I am accumulating these random ideas explicitly for the reason of generating creative insights. I separate out the ideas that are already being used, for example, in projects I'm working on, into another category. Before doing this, I used to group my ideas by subject matter rather than functionality. The problem with grouping by subject matter for me was that it wasn't clear what needed to be retrieved for what purposes. It was just a smattering of everything thrown in there that all happened to relate to a subject but had no relevance or connection beyond that. Remember that categories should not be arbitrary. We should not make a grouping simply because it would look cool to do so. There must be an intention and design in mind. If it serves your purposes to group by subject matter, that's great. For me, I found better use in grouping by functionality. I find that when I am retrieving information, I am retrieving based on actionability. That is, in my workflow, I retrieve based on what I need to do at the moment. If I'm looking for inspiration, I go to my fertilizers locations. If I'm ready to work, I go to my locations for ideas that are currently being used. By delineating them like this, I get clear on what is being used for what, and there's no traffic jams of random ideas clogging up places where I need to see my ongoing projects. I hope that this introduction to organization philosophy has been interesting. I plan to continue this series where I elaborate on what it truly means to be organized and give more in-context examples. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Together, let's live an inspired and organized life.